Hey, what's up YouTube? Julio here. And in today's video, I'm excited to bring you guys a tutorial on how you can build a responsive website using HTML and CSS. No frameworks or libraries required. Also, as you can see here, I have this really cool section that I'm excited to show you guys how you can build one just like that one. Then if we go into the responsive view, you'll see that my content will adapt no matter what the size of the device is. Then we get the hamburger menu and the pop-out navigation. But before we start, I just wanted to say that if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and turning on bell notifications for more videos like this one. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, give it a thumbs up, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Now, let's jump right in. So as you guys can see, I've already laid out the basic structure for this project, but if you want to follow along with me, I'll be placing all of the starter files you see here up on GitHub. The link will be in the description below. Now, the first thing we're going to do is open up the header tag. The header is going to hold all the information for the navigation, including the logo. But before we do that, we want to open up a div with the class of container. The container is going to have a max width that's going to keep the entire site consistent. Inside of the container, we want to have the nav tags themselves. Then a div with the class of nav brand. We want to have an anchor tag, and inside of it, an image, which is going to be the logo. Underneath of the nav brand, we want to have another div with the class of menu icons. We also want to apply an additional class of open. Here we want to have the hamburger menu icon. So we can just apply a class of icon, then ion, md, and then we can say menu. Then we can have a ul with the class of list, nav list actually. Inside of the UL, we want to have another icon, except that this one will be close as opposed to open. Same thing with the icon name. So now we get the hamburger menu and the X to close the navigation. Then underneath it, we can open up an li with the class of nav item, an anchor tag of the class of nav link, and this will just say home. Now we can just grab the li and paste it down below a few more times. We can modify the text accordingly. This one will be pricing, booking, and about. So this is basically going to be it for the header. Now I will be creating a section. So the section is going to have the class of hero. And again, inside of the hero, we want to have a container div. Then I'm going to have a div with the class of main message. And then here I want to have an h3 that will say the great outdoors. Then I want to have an h1 that will read adventure. A p tag that will have some dummy text. Finally, a div with the class of CTA, and then an anchor tag with the class of btn. Should be btn, not tbn. And the anchor tag will just simply read book now. So now that we have the header in the first section, we can go ahead and go into the styles.css and do some basic resets followed by the styles. So I'm going to use the universal selector. Also, I will use it on the before and after. And what I'll do here is just reset the margin, the padding, and set the box sizing to border box. Then I'll target the HTML document, set the font family to Nunito, and I'll set a fallback of sans serif just in case that the first font is not available. The root font size will be 10 pixels, and the reason is because we'll be using rems, and that makes the math a lot easier. Finally, the box sizing will be set to border box. So now every single item will inherit basically border box as you see here. Actually, this should be inherit to begin with. Sorry about that. Now I want to apply some global styles, and since these are all going to be global, I want to have a comment. First thing I'll do, target all my anchor tags and get rid of the text decoration by setting it to none. Then I'll target all of my ULs, say list style, none. My P tags will have a font size of 1.6 rem. And this is all just to keep everything consistent. The images will have a width of 100%. I want to set a max width of 100%. That way it doesn't overflow its parent container. Finally, a height of auto. Then I'll apply some padding top and bottom to all of my sections just so that I can have some spacing. So even though you can't see it, the image is now taking all the space over here, but we can sort that out later. For now, I'll just target the body and I'll give it a background color of, let's say, this one right here. The reason for that is just so that we can see better what's going on. Later on, we're going to come back to it and get rid of this rule right here. Now we can go ahead and style the header. So again, comment for the header, and I'll say that the header will have a width of 100%, a height of 5 rem. Then I can say that the position will be set to absolute, top will be set to 0, and left to 0 as well. But for now, I'll comment, actually I'm also going to do a C index of, let's say, 1. But for now, let me actually comment this portion out. The reason for that is because I want to show you guys something later on when I start to style the hero section. Next step is to style the container. The container will have a width of 100% and a fixed max width of 98 rem, so it's not gonna get any bigger than that. Then I want to say that the margin will be set to 0 auto, just so that I can center the container in the middle. And then I want to say that I want to have some padding left and right of 1.5 rem. The next step is for us to actually go in and style the navigation. So I'm going to select the nav. I want to say that the width will be 100%. Then I'll say display will be flex, line items will be center, and justify content will be center, just so that I get some space in between everything that I have inside the nav. Next, I want to say that, well, not center, it should be space between actually. And now you see that everything's like evenly spaced. The next thing I want to do now is give it some padding top and bottom of our rem, and then I want to have a border bottom of 1 pixel solid RGBA 225 to 255 actually, and it's going to have an alpha of 0.2, so it's going to be basically a really faded white. Now I can target the nav brand and say that the width will be set to 2 rem. The next step is for us to actually style the icons. So the first thing I'll do is select the menu icons and I'll say that the font size will be 3.5 rem. Color will be set to white. Actually, I want to do FAA instead, just so that I get a darker shade of white. Next thing I'll do is cursor pointer, which is basically gonna make it as if it was clickable. Now I want to select my close icon because it's going to be a different color. And this one will have the hex code of EB64B8C. And I have an extra number in there. It should be the B, so let's get rid of that. And now you see that we get the color we want. Now I can go ahead and actually style the navigation. So, well, in this case, the nav list. So nav list, here I'll give it a width of 25 rem, a height of 100 of the viewport height, and I want to make sure that the background color is also different. This one will be D7, D4, E, D. Now I'll give it a position of fixed, and then I'll set a top position of 0, and then a right of 0. The next thing I want to do is to actually, I will do something later on because I want to hide this, so I'll do a negative value of 26 rem, but for now, just so that we can see what's going on, I'll keep it at 0. Next thing I want to do is display a flex, and then the flex direction will be set to column. So now you see that it's back into a column. I want to center it, so all the content inside of it, so I'll say the align items will be set to center, and then justify content will be set to center. I want to make sure that I give it a C index just so that it stays on top of everything, and then transition will be set to all at 650 ms, ease in, ease out. The transition is there in place for when the time comes when we add the click event. That way it fades in, well, it slides in smoothly. The next thing I want to do now is set up my close icon all the way up here. So that's going to be pretty simple. I'll just say close, be positioned, absolute, and then it will have a top of 1 rem and a left of 1.5 rem. So now I can go ahead and style the links. Well, before I do that, I'll select my nav item and give it some separation top and bottom by using margin 1.5 rem and then 0 left and right. Now I can select the nav link. And what I'll do here is change the font size. I'll say that the font size will also be 1.6 rem. Next thing I want to do here is probably text transform to uppercase. And then the color will be RGBA of, let's do something like a faded black, so 0.7. And that's going to be pretty much it for the link. Now that we have the navigation actually styled, what I want to do is do the JavaScript that will close this and open it. So let's go back to the nav list, find right, and we can do negative 26 rem. So now it disappears. What we can do now is create a new rule. So just under it, I'll select the nav list and also apply an additional class to it of active, which we still haven't created yet. we're applying the styles here, but we will apply it this particular class through JavaScript. And what will happen is that when the nav list also has the class of active, then it will go back to the 0 position, which is going to be where it was before. So now we can just simply go into the JavaScript, and we're going to be creating a function expression that will select all of our elements, as opposed to having to select them one by one. So let's just create a comment, function expression to select elements. And then here what we want to say is const select element will equal an arrow function. In this case, we're just going to be passing in the value of s, which is going to be the element. And then remember, arrow function, we can say document that query selector, and then we can pass in s. And that's going to be pretty much it. Remember that if you're just using a single line, you don't need to use like the curly braces and the return keyword. So we can just keep it as it is, and it's going to work. Now we can have another comment that says open the menu on click. Again, now we can use the function that we created, and we can simply just pass in open, and we can say that we want to add an event listener, and in here it's going to be a click event. Again, we can use an arrow function, and then in here we can say that again we want to select what we want to toggle, or in this case add the class to, which is going to be the nav list. And then here we can say class list, and then add active. Essentially, we can do the same thing to close it, so we can just simply grab the same code, paste it down here, and we can just say that it's for close. We can grab close again, and then on click, it's like nav list, we want to actually remove. So let's see if it actually worked. So when we click here, it should be actually working, and the reason why it's not working, it's because we still haven't linked the script tag. So we're going to go back to the bottom of the page, and before the body closing tag we can say script, and it's going to be of type text JavaScript, and then the source is going to be scripts.js. And now if we click on it, you see that everything is working flawlessly. So the navigation is now taken care of. We can go back and we can continue to apply the styles for the hero section, which are going to be pretty simple. So again, let's scroll back down. We can just say that here it's going to be like another comment for the hero. And what we'll do here is simply just select the hero. The width will be 100%. Height 80, viewport height. And the background color, actually not background color, we want to use multiple rules, so we can just simply say background will be a linear gradient, and it's going to be 135 degrees. Then we separate it with a comma, and it's going to be an RGBA value of 4924, 131, and then an alpha of 0.9. Then again, after the parentheses, we can say 0%, Then again, separate it with a comma, and we can do the following RGBA value, which is going to be 7256, then 149, and then an alpha of, let's do a little bit lighter, so we can do 0.8. And now we can say after the parentheses that it's going to be 100%. And again, we're going to be using another value, so URL, it's going to be pointing to the images folder, and then hero, or in this case header BG, then it's going to be position center, and then no repeat. The background size will be set to cover, and we're also going to give it a position of relative. So this is what I was talking about. Now you see that the hero section is just under the header here. So this is where the position absolute comes in. We want this to be on top of the hero section, so we can just simply say that the position would be position absolute. So now it kind of moves out of the flow. And then when we specify the top, and as well as the left, it's going to be right over here, but we can't see it yet, and the reason for that is because it's behind it. So that's why we do a C index of 1. Now we get rid of it, and we get what we want. Now we just have to manipulate the text inside of it so that it's not under the header we have over here. So again, we're going to go down here, but before we actually style the main message, we're going to apply that wave I showed you in the demo. So we're going to be using a pseudo element. So again, hero before. We want to set the content to an empty string. Then we can say positioned will be absolute, the left will be 0, and the bottom will be set to 0. Then we can say that the height will be 4.7 rem, and that's the height of that image that I'm using, which is the wave small. And let's see if I can find it right here. As you can see, the height is 47 pixels, so I'm doing 47 pixels here, but I'm doing it in rems. Then I can do background image, or I can just do background so that I can apply multiple properties at the same time. The URL is going to be images, and then it's going to be wave small, and then I can say center, not that, center, no repeat, and then I can say that the background size will be set to cover. So the next thing that I have to do here, and seems like I'm missing something maybe because my image is not showing up. So hero before, I have my content, position is set to absolute, I have a left. Oh, I had set up a border bottom, so that was my mistake. And then I want to also make sure that I set up a width. It's like sometimes even the smallest mistakes can cause several issues. So now you see that we have the wave that we want. So one thing that I want to do now is scroll up back to the rule where we had the body color, background color, and we actually want to delete it because we no longer need it. So let's go back down, and underneath of the hero, we actually now want to style the main message. So the main message will have a width of 100%. Then we want to set up a max width of 50 rem. Then we want to say that the color for the elements inside of it, or the text in this case, will be again FAA, FAA, FAA. Then the text transform will be set to uppercase. And then I want to translate, or in other words, move it down. So I'll say translate transform, translate, Y, and now say 20%. Right now it looks kind of like it's way up there, but the reason for that is because this is like way all the way down here, but in reality phones aren't really that long. So if we go into the responsive view, I can show you exactly what I mean. So for example, in iPhone SE, this is how it would look, so it's perfect. Later on, for larger screens, we're going to be adding media queries so that we can move it down a little bit more. But for now, it's gonna stay as it is. So now the next thing that I want to do is style the elements inside of the main message. So the first thing I'll do is target the main message H3. And then here, I just want to modify the font size and set it to 1.6 rem. Then main message H1. And this one will have the font family of Aldrich. Again, I'll use a sans serif fallback just in case the font is not available. I'm going to increase the font size to actually font family. So font family, font size will be 4 rem. Then what I want to do is have margin top and bottom to create some separation between the text. So 1 rem and 0 left and right. So now you see that we got some separation here and some separation here as well. Now I want to select my P tag. So the P tag is simply just going to have a text transform to lowercase. So now we have pretty much everything we need. The only thing left is to style the button. That is right here. So we are going to target the BTN, and what we'll do is just set a background color. Again, it's going to be that EV648C that we used before. We want to set up a border radius of, let's say, 2 rem. Then we want to also change the color to that FAI. I want to say that display will be inline block. Actually, it would be block, but that's the reason because right now it's an inline element, so we can't use the margin top and bottom. So what we have to do is make it into a block. But you see that if I make it into a block, then it's going to stretch 100% of the width. So what we want to do instead is make sure that it's an inline block. So now we can actually apply margin top and bottom, and it's not gonna stretch all the way through the other side of the screen. So I'm also gonna do some margin top of 2 rem. Then I'll do some padding to make the button bigger. And I'll do 1 rem top and bottom, and then I'll do 2.5 rem left and right. So now we get a nice button. I'll text transform to uppercase. Then I'll do a transition on the background color to, let's say, 650 ms, just to keep it consistent. And then now I can actually create the hover effect for it. So it's going to be BTN hover. And we simply just want to change the background color. And we'll just switch to a darker version of that EB6 color that we used. So it will be CE58, and then we can say 7B. So let's not forget the pound sign or hash, and now you see that we get the hover effect. The next step for us is to actually create the next section, which will be the one down here. So let's go back into the HTML document so that we can continue to build the site. So underneath of the section for the main message, what we want to do, and actually before we get started, what I want to do here is underneath of the header, I'll open up some main tags. And since this is all going to be the main content, it's a good practice to place it in here. Although the tag isn't really doing anything, it just keeps everything better organized. So now underneath of the hero section, what we want to do is create another section with the class of experience. Experience outdoors. Again, we want to place everything inside of the container. And then we can just say that we want a div with the class of title. Actually, yeah, we can just call it title heading. Inside of this div, I want to have an h3 that will read explore, actually not explore, experience. Then I want to have an h1 and it will say the thrilling outdoors. And it's, just underneath of it, I want to have a really brief description. So I'll just use again some dummy text, and then we can just delete a good portion of it. And we can just keep the first sentence. Actually, I should have just selected everything. It's a lot faster. And we can just keep that on the same line. So that's going to be pretty much it for the title heading. Now underneath of the title heading, we actually want to set up the grid. So we can open up a div with the class of activities. Grid. Not drig, but grid. And let me just scroll this down a little bit more. Now let's make a comment here. This will be grid item number 1. And again, this is just going to have a simple class of activities. Grid item. And I also want to apply an additional class. This one will have the class of star gazing. So inside of this, what I simply want to do is just add an icon, a heading, and then a description. So again, I'll use the I tag, then I'll use my icon with the class of icon, the class of ion, and this one will say that it's going to be a star. Then I'll have an h1, which is going to be for the heading, stargazing. And then a p tag. Again, some dummy text. Now the rest of them are going to be essentially the same. So we can just save some time and copy this all the way from the comment, paste it down below, and we can say that the icon for this one is not going to be a star, it's going to be for the location, so we can use a compass. We also want to change this class right here from stargazing to hiking, and it should be an O, not an A. And if we scroll down, we should be seeing the icon for the compass here. Now we can go ahead, repeat the same process, and make sure that it says number 2, and underneath it we can just go ahead and paste the next one, which will be number 3, and this one will have the additional class of camping as opposed to stargazing, and the icon will be bonfire. We also have to change the headings. So this one will be for hiking, and this one for camping. And that's going to be pretty much it for this section. Now we're going to go back to the CSS so that we can continue to style it. So as usual, the first thing we're going to do here is create a comment. So underneath of the button, we can say experience the outdoors. And the first rule will be getting rid of the padding that the section has. So again, experience outdoors, and I'll say that the padding will be set to 0. The next thing that I want to do is style the title heading. Text align will be set to center. Then I want to text transform to uppercase. The margin bottom will be set to 10 rem just to create some separation between the heading and the rest of the content. And then I can say that the color, it's going to be again really faded black, so I'll use RGBA 0000 and then 0.7. So now I'll style the headings and p tags individually. So title heading H3 will simply just have a font size of 1.4 rem. Then I can say that that's going to be it. The title heading H1 will have a font family again of Aldrich with a sans serif fallback. We also want to make sure that we style the font size so we can make it 2 rem. And then finally, I'll just apply some margin top and bottom of 0.5 rem. And then actually that's going to be for the top, and then 0, and then I can say that 1 rem is going to be here. Next thing that I want to do is style the p tag. So I'll say title heading p we'll just basically have a text transform to lowercase, and that looks a lot better. So now I can just go ahead and style the activities grid, the grid over here. So activities grid, and I'll give it a display of grid. And what we're going to be doing here is basically creating a grid that collapses once it doesn't have enough space, which essentially makes it responsive without having to add any media queries for it. So I'll just say that grid template columns, I'll use the repeat function, not auto, it's supposed to be template. I'll add the repeat function. So in here, I'll just say auto fit, and then comma separate it, and I'll set a mix max of 25 rem. That's going to be minimum, and then the max is going to be 1 FR, which is 1 fraction. And grid also offers you a grid gap, so that way we can get some separation between the items. So I can say grid gap, and it's going to be 1.5 rem. So now you see that we have separation in between them. And if I make it bigger, you'll see that everything is responsive right here, and we still haven't written a single media query. You see that the image is like messed up here, but don't worry about that because we'll be changing it later on. Now after we actually style the grid, the activities grid, the next step is to style the grid item. So again, activities, grid item. And in here, I want to set up a height of 40 rem. Then what I want to do is give it some padding of 5 rem all around. Then I want to make sure that my color is set to FAA again, and it's gonna go away, but that's because it's merging in with the background. Later on, we're going to be applying some background images. But just so that you guys can actually see what's going on, I'll just comment this out for now. Then I'll say that position will be set to relative. Then I can say that display will be set to flex. Again, flex direction to column. Then I can say that justify content will be center. And just to give it a clickable effect, we can also do cursor pointer, even though it's not going to be clickable. Also, let's not forget to do a C index. And in this case, I'll just do 1. So now that we have the grid item, we can actually get this again and use a pseudo element. So before, set the content, and this is basically going to be the overlay. So position will be set to absolute, width 100%. Before I do the width, I'd rather just do the top 0, left 0, then a width 100%. Same thing with the height. And now I can just do a background image, since this is going to be a linear gradient. And it's essentially going to be the same we used before. So as opposed to doing it from scratch, we can just simply copy it right here. And then we scroll back down and just simply paste it in here. So now we get the same gradient effect. Now the next step is for us to actually give it a C index of -1. That way it's going to be behind the text. Now I'll select the stargazing, and what I'll simply do here is a background image. So URL, then images, stars, then I can say center, not color, center, no repeat. And now I get my background. Since now we can actually see the white, I can just uncomment this. And I'll now grab this, well, not this, but this instead, the background. And I can say hiking, paste this in here, and I can just switch over the images. Then I can do the same thing for camping. And now that we have all the images, we can just continue to style the rest of the elements inside of the items. So what I'll do now is grab the activities grid item I, and I'll make the font size bigger. Then I'll change the color to the EV64 that we used before. Then I'll target the activities grid item H1, and again I'll give it the font family of Aldrich with the sans serif fallback. We also want to change the font size, so in this case I'll just do a font size of 1.7 rem. Then I can do a text transform of, let's say, uppercase, and then some margin top and bottom for separation of 2 rem and 0 left and right. And that's going to be pretty much it for this section. Now we can go ahead and get started with the testimonials. So let's go back into the index.html, and underneath of the section here for the experience outdoors, we can just simply open up another section, and this one will have the class of testimonial. Again, we want to have a container div. Then I'll create another div inside of it with the class of testimonial. Keep in mind that these are different because this should be testimonials. So with an S, this one is just testimonial. So in here, what I want to do is actually create two boxes. In this case, one for the text and one for the image. So I'll have a div with the class of testimonial text box. Then I'll just have a p tag with some dummy text, or maybe I can just make something up of my own. This trip was amazing. I can't wait to do it all over again. So now underneath of the p tag, I want to have an icon. The icon will be for the quote marks. So the class will be icon and an additional class of ion md and then quote. And if we scroll down, we should be able to see it right here. So now outside of the testimonial text box, we can have another div, and it's simply going to have the class of testimonial, and I can just say customer. And here I'm going to have an image. The image will post to images and then profile pic, and then underneath it I'll just have an h1 with a name, which is going to be Martin G. And that's going to be pretty much it for the testimonial section. Now we can go ahead and go back to the CSS so that we can actually continue to style it. Again, this is going to be pretty simple. Let's just create another comment, testimonials. Select the testimonial section, then a width of 100%, a height of 80 of the viewport height. And to make my life a lot easier, since it's going to be exactly the same, I can just copy the one from before for the hero. And I can just come down here and paste it down below. Now the only thing I have to do now is change the background image to testimonials. And now I have everything that I need. The only thing I have to do is just continue to style the site over here. So the next step is for me to actually go down here and get the before ready so that I can do the other wave over here. So testimonials before, position again will be absolute, top will be set to 0, left will be set to 0 as well, width 100%, height, again remember that the height was only 47 pixels, so we can do 4.7 rem, and then I can do the background image URL. Well, not image, but in this case I can just do background. So images, wave, small reburst, then center, no repeat. And then background size will be set to cover. So now you see that we get the nice section with the effect that it has a wave on top and then a wave at the bottom. The next step is to target the testimonial. Remember that there's a difference. One has an S and one doesn't. I know it's probably not the best names, but for now it'll do. So width will be 100% again. Color is going to be set to that FAA, not content. Then the position will be set to absolute. And then I can simply just do a top of 55%. Then I can do a left of 50% to center it vertically and horizontally. And then translate -50%, -50%. And I also want to make sure that my text is aligned to the center. Underneath it, I'm going to target the text box. And I'll say that'll give it some padding top and bottom of 0 and 1.5 left and right. Then some margin bottom for some separation of 2 rem. And position will be set to relative. The reason for that is because I'm going to be positioning the icon absolute, and I want it to stay relative to the text box. So now I can say testimonial text box I, position will be absolute, then top will be -8 rem, left 50%, transform, translate X, -50% to move it all the way to the middle. And for now, you can see it over here. So next thing I'll do is just make it bigger. So I'll give it a font size of 8 rem. Again, we're going to be using that color again. So EB. And then I can just slightly fade it by using opacity and set it to 0.5. Then I can do a C index of -1. Now I can go ahead and style the custom the testimonial customer image. So in this case, I'll just say that the width, actually I can just do here, let me see. Yeah, width will be 10 rem, height, actually I don't even have to set a height, although it's also like a good practice, so I'll set a height of 10 rem as well. Then I can do a border radius of 100% to make it round, and now I can apply a border of 3 pixels solid. Again, we'll use that same pink color, and I'll see that it looks a lot better. So that's going to be pretty much it for this section. The only thing that I'll do here differently is go back here to the background image and say that the background attachment will be fixed. So now when we scroll it, we get that parallax effect, although it's not a true parallax effect, but it does the job. So now we can go back to the HTML document and we can continue with the next section. So actually I should have minimized this from the start. It gives us a lot more room to work with, but better late than never, I guess. So now I can go underneath of the testimonial section and I can open up another section, and this one will have the class of begin adventure. Again, we want to have another container and then a title heading. Since we already did this in the past, let's save some time by just grabbing the heading we have over here, and then we can just go back down and paste it in here. So the only thing we have to do now is just change the text, and this one will just say adventure begin. So underneath of the title heading, what we want to do is create another grid. This one will have the class of Adventure Grid. Inside of the Adventure Grid, we're going to have an Adventure Grid item. So let's create a div and apply that class. And in here, we're just simply going to have a p tag, some dummy text, and again, we're going to have a second grid item. So let's make a comment. And now we can just simply copy this and paste it down below. Then we can go ahead and create the button. So we want to go underneath of the Adventure Grid item, and we want to go actually underneath of the other grid item, which is the main grid. So in between the grid, the Adventure Grid, and the container div, before it closes, what you want to do is have an anchor tag. It's not gonna gonna go anywhere, and it will simply just say book your adventure. And let me just scroll back down. Now we have it over here. We can just simply apply the class of btn, and now you see it that it shows up. So since we're already here, we can just simply go underneath of the main section tag, and we can create the footer. So footer p, and then I can say ampersand to get the copyright icon, and I can say 2019 outdoors, and then I can say all rights reserved. So now that we have everything else that we needed, we can finally just go into the CSS, style this particular section, and then we can continue to make the entire site responsive by using media queries. So again, we'll start out by creating a comment for this particular section. So we can say, what did I call it again? It was the adventure, begin adventures. So here we can just simply target the adventures grid, and again, let's be efficient and save some time. Since we already did a grid before, we can just simply go back here, grab this, or in this case it's a lot easier if we can just grab what's inside of it, and we can just simply say that the adventure grid will have these values right here. So now if we make it bigger, you'll see that everything is going to be nice and responsive. So now that we have that in place, what I want to do is actually add a little bit of margin bottom, and I'll do 2 rem, and it's going to create some extra separation between the text and the button. Now I'll select the p tag, adventures grid, item p, and I'll do the RGBA of the faded black, color, RGBA 0.7. It looks a lot better now. And then that's pretty much it for this one. What we want to do next is actually style the footer. So we can just say footer, give it some padding, top and bottom of 2 rem, and then 0 left and right, and we want to change the background color to the same background color we used for the navigation. Then my text online will be set to center, and then the color will be RGBA, again same one we used before, 0.7. So now if we make this bigger, you see that it looks a lot better. So the next step is for us to actually make this completely responsive by using some media queries. So again, let me just minimize this a little bit more. So what I'll do here is simply just scroll down under the footer and I'll say media queries. Now my first breakpoint is going to be at media screen and min width of, let's say, 350 pixels. Now what I'll simply do here is just move the main message. So main message, and here I just want to say translate white, the Y, translate Y, transform, and I'll move it to about 40%. Now my next breakpoint, well, we're still within this breakpoint. I will also want to, actually no, when thinking about it, I'll leave this as it is. So I'll just create the next breakpoint instead. And what I'll do here is pretty simple. This breakpoint is going to be set at 470. And in here, what I want to do is actually switch my images for the hero. So let me just get rid of this, and I'll target the hero before image. And what I'll say here is that the height is going to be 9.4 rem. And then I can say background, URL, images, and then I can say wave medium. So again, if we go back and take a look at the image, wave medium, we can see that the height is 94 pixels. So that's really important that you make sure you specify the height. Next, what we have to do is set the background size again to cover. And as you can see, we have some issues here where it's not covering the whole thing, so we have some space, so it results in us seeing some part of the background, but we can easily fix that. Let's just go up here to where we specified it. Let me see if I can find it right here. And as we can see over here for the hero, we can do a bottom of -3 pixels. And as you can see now, that solves the issue. So we moved it down, we no longer see the background. We also have to do the same thing for the one over here. So we can just go back down to the next section where we applied it. So wave over here, but instead we'll say top -3 pixels. So that should solve that particular issue. So the next step is for us to actually target the testimonials, and it's going to be essentially the same thing. So let's grab the hero, and we can just change this class to testimonials. And here we can change the image to wave medium reburst, which will be this one right here. Now you see that it's slightly larger. Now for the next breakpoint, it's going to be at 700 pixels, and that's where most of the changes are going to happen. So let me just grab this portion of the media query. Let me just get rid of the 4 and add an extra 0, and then a closing curly brace. Now I want to make sure that I make my header slightly larger. So what I'll do is select the header and set the height to 8 rem. The reason for that is because I'm going to actually make this logo right here a little bit larger. Now underneath of the header, I want to select my nav brand, and I'll make the width 3.5 rem. And if we make it bigger, you'll be able to see that the media query is taking effect. So let me just make this smaller so that we can better see what's going on. Underneath of the nav brand, I want to basically reset the entire navigation we have over here so that we can have a layout over here. So I'll say that the nav list will have a width of initial, height will be set to initial as well. Then the background color will be set to transparent. Position will be initial as well. Now you see that we can see it over here. Then I can say that the right top, actually I'll do that first, initial, right, initial, and then display will be set to flex, and flex direction will be set to row. Actually, we already flexed it before, so we don't really need to specify flex again. And then the transition will be set to initial as well. So now that we reset the navigation, we can just simply go down here and we can select the menu icons, and I can say display none because we don't really need it anymore. Then I can select the nav item, and I'll just simply give it some spacing left and right. So I'll say the margin, top and bottom will be 0 and 2.5 left and right. Now you see that it looks a lot nicer. Next step is to actually select the nav link. And what I'll do here is basically just change the color to FAI. Then position will be relative. Then I can say that the font size will be set to 1.3 rem. Something that I'll do here is actually remember that we had that current link highlighted. So I'll add an additional selector here of current. And we're going to go back to the HTML for a moment. Let me just make this bigger. And we're going to apply the class of current to the first link we have over here for the home. Now we go back to the styles and we can continue to style the website. So now we can just create the pseudo elements. In this case, it's going to be nav link before, and then that current before. Position will be set to absolute. Left will be 0, and then bottom will be set to negative 0.5 rem. Then I can say that the background color is going to be that pink again. And I also want to make sure that I set a height, a width and height, 100%. Then the height will be 2 pixels. And now what I want to do is actually use transform scale X, set it to 0 so that we can't see it anymore. Then I want to say transform origin will be from the left. Also, I'll transition the transform and say 650 ms. Now I can do some individual styles, and here I can just simply say that the current link before is going to have the border bottom style by default. So I'll say transform scale X will be set to 1. So now we can see it over here. Next step is to actually go ahead and select the nav link and say on hover before we want to transform scale X to 1. So now if we hover over the links, we get the nice hover effect animation. Now underneath of the nav link, we can go ahead and select the hero. And the only thing we want to do here is adjust the height. We're going to be changing it to 60 viewport height, therefore making it slightly smaller. The main message will be transform translate Y, and I'll say about 80%, so that I can move it down a little bit more. Or in this case, maybe let's do 70, 75. I think 75 looks a lot better. Or maybe even 70. 70 looks perfect. Then we can just go ahead and select the main message. Well, actually we already did the main message. We just have to style the title heading H1, make the font size 2.5 rem. And then for the trip info, which is going to be down here, that actually I don't even have a class with trip info. We did the grid item, which was for the adventures, so we don't really need to do anything here because everything already looks great. So let's actually move down to the next breakpoint. Again, let me just go down up here, get this portion of the media query, go down here, and the next breakpoint is going to be at 950 pixels. Again, the only thing we're going to be doing here is just switching the images for the waves. So since this is going to be exactly the same as before, I'll just copy this portion, paste it in here, and now I can only modify the height. So this one will be 2.7, and then the wave is going to be the wave large. Then the other one is going to be the same for the height, and the wave is going to be wave large reversed. Now that we have the right waves, if we make it bigger, you see them grow, as you see right there. The next step is to actually create the final media query, which is going to be at 1200 pixels. And the only thing I'll do here is just make the hero slightly bigger. So in this case, I'll say hero will have a height of 75 with a viewport height. And that should be pretty much it. So now if we make it bigger, everything should be exactly as I showed you within the demo. So just to make sure, let's go back into the responsive view. If we click on the link, well, the hamburger menu, it opens. Everything on mobile looks great. If I make it bigger, everything should still be adjusting, as we see over here. And if we set it to 100%, seems like we have to move this down slightly, so let me just go back to the other point that we had. And it's supposed to be getting a 70, maybe I can make it 60, or even let's just do 50. and that looks slightly better. So yeah guys, this is pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys found it useful. If you learned something new, again, give it a thumbs up. If you're still thinking about subscribing, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notifications so that you're notified every time I upload a new video. And if you have any questions, just be sure to let me know in the comments below. I usually try my best to answer all of them. Now, I'll catch you guys in the next one.